go ahead and introduce Paul Doherty, who is a registered architect and is one of the global industry's most sought-after thought leaders, strategists, and integrators of process, technology, and business, who is currently the Director of Innovation for ScreenPoint, a Sequoia Capital-funded company who is headquartered in Shanghai, China, with offices in Delhi, India, Hong Kong, London, and San Francisco. He's an author, educator, analyst, and a consultant to Fortune 500 organizations, global government agencies, prominent institutions, and the most prestigious architectural, engineering, and contracting firms in the world. For those of you who have been with Tech for a while, you may recall Paul presented a long time ago at one of our conferences in Houston earlier in the decade and was quite a hit, and we have him back by popular demand. And at this point, I want to hand it over to Paul, and thank you very much, Paul, for joining us today.
Thanks, Nicole, and good morning, everybody. This presentation is going to be a little different from, I guess, some other technology presentations that you may have seen. A lot of things you're going to see today are in production and or implemented from various parts of the world. And the real idea of the takeaway of this is not to say that the stuff that you're going to see here is something that everyone should be doing. It's more or less, this is some trends that we're working with, that we're seeing, and this is more or less to say, you know, the water's fine in certain areas and come on in, but in others, it's more of a wake-up call about expert systems, about what it means to be, you know, using technology, implementing into real projects, and some of the innovations that we've seen from outside the industry and how they're being implemented inside. A lot of the information you'll see here is actually being shown for the first time. We need to get permission on certain projects because of the government joint ventures that we do have. But I think for, again, the overall idea for this presentation is to, well, let's just communicate and see what's going on out there, almost as a bit of a measurement to see what you're doing inside of your firms and your businesses, and start seeing where some of the trends are going. So, you know, with that, there's a lot of talk about how the industry's changed and changing constantly, and that's something that would have happened with or without the recession. It's just that the velocity of change now and the need to change has created a new normal. And a lot of that new normal is about sharing information. And it's something that we just have not been great at. We've been trying with the advent of communication technology such as you know, the internet, rather than being a computing environment but more of a communication environment. It has created three big areas that you know, we focused in at ScreenPoint now for upwards of 9 years ago. Of course, the first one is to communicate more effectively and to coordinate that information, and most importantly, to collaborate. And I think this last one is something that we all struggled with. You know, there's lots of people that do communicate well together. I'm sure you've been on certain projects where, you know, the collaboration has been very good. But for the most part, we're not trained, and we actually have not had built into our DNA how to collaborate well. And I think that some of the stumbling that we've ran across, everything from the dot-coms of, you know, 10 to 12 years ago, of trying to share documentation and collaborate that way, which did not go too well. And now this whole world of BIM and IDP and EIO and God knows what's coming on down the road, it's all nice, and there's a lot of really good information and a lot of good process-changing initiatives underway. But we have projects right now that need help. And some of the news that we've been able to report back to you, specifically in the work that we're doing in China, in the Middle East, is that, you know, BIM is here, and it's not going away, at least what we call BIM. But you know, you put two people in a room and try and describe what BIM means, you're going to get a lot of different answers. So a lot of the ideas of this collaborative nature of trying to work with information built within standards that we have that are tried and true in the document paper-based world, sometimes we stumble a little bit when we try and translate those into the digital world, and we're learning. So any person that comes around and says that they've figured it out and they have the expert system and they are the expert, I would be doubtful, because we're all learning here. So everyone on this phone call, don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball at all. This is the pioneering stage, and it's wonderful. But one of the things that we can do with a lot of this information, especially the digital information, is to control it. And that's where a lot of this that you're going to see today is focused in on. We found that although there may be 38,000 commands in the latest BIM release of a piece of software, we use about 5. And when we do that, the information, the data actually becomes more important than the creation. And that's a very, very fundamental different type of way of looking at what our deliverables are and how we communicate things out to the field so that we can create the built environment. We're moving very rapidly now because of the necessity of the economy, moving away from a document-centric world into a data-centric world. And the people that know how to control that data, the flow of information, well, those people are going to be in a different type of position in the value chain in a project. So when we started taking a look at what this new world meant, and we really started going into this about 3 years ago in a meaningful way, it was really about innovation. The number one thing, specifically in the U.S. markets, for those of you on the call that are working here, having the luxury of work now just about everywhere else all over the world, the number one thing that we always have here is our innovation, and that will not change. We're still looked upon as that innovative leader from a market standpoint, so that when we are called into places like Shanghai or Xi'an or Delhi or Mumbai to actually start working on projects, it's about the innovation. So understanding that we're a data-centric world with a high value on innovation really provides a fertile ground for rethinking what our deliverables are out there. So, how do we do that? And the first thing first is back to basics. What do we do? And for the most part, throwing a mirror up to your firm or your business and seeing what type of business you are is not for the faint of heart. Most of us, when we look in the mirror, when we go out in the morning, I think we have a view of how we look, and then you see the reality, and sometimes you don't want to see it. Our firms are the same way. And there's nothing wrong with being the type of firm you are. It's just understanding where you need to position yourself to be that firm. If you are a firm that is high-end, if you're a star architecture firm, if you're a high-end engineering firm, there's certain technologies and certain things that you have to do, no matter what the cost, in order to maintain the quality level of the type of work you're doing. So this follows a lot of the marketing strategic initiatives that your firm may have gone through. When you're looking at technologies and you see the things that are coming online, understand that sometimes you don't need to have that, $100,000 piece of software. In other cases, if you're that type of firm, you can't afford not to. There's the other group, which the majority of us on the phone are in, which is that whole middle ground. We tend to be maybe an expert in a typical type of building, maybe hospital, maybe it's some certain type of infrastructure, but for the most part, a lot of us work in that middle ground of being an all-inclusive type of vendor and or company that needs the services of these vendors and consultants and organizations. But just putting the mirror up to yourself and saying, okay, this is who we are, you now put yourself into a world where you can pick and choose what you need. But for the most part, you're looking for a supply chain, a good supply chain of the information coming into your organization and how it actually passes through you and moves to the other side. I think that that's something that, this BIM IDP thing really starts to focus in on in a good way, but I've yet to see it implemented very well on a massive scale. I've never seen a project actually go from a cradle-to-grave type of way of working, although it's a great concept. So if we need to do something right now at StreetPoint, we took a look at back to basics and said, what would it take to actually create a piece of data, think of it as digital DNA, and then move it out into the future. So that's where a lot of this agenda is going to actually take us, is to say, what's the technologies that we do have available today? How are things defined if we do look at things as a data-centric approach rather than document-centric as a digital asset? And then what do you do with it afterwards? Where's the value proposition? We'll take a look at real-time environments and what we're calling digital cities. Some work that we've done in China, here in the U.S. in San Francisco. We'll talk a little bit about Dubai and a potential opportunity in the Midwest as well. We'll actually also show you some information that takes all these grand ideas of digital cities, assets, individual buildings, and actually brings it down to an individual shopping aisle for one of the major retailers in the world to show that the scalability of data is about digital DNA, and whoever's controlling that and can communicate, coordinate, and collaborate that information best is actually going to win. So and we'll actually show you how it's done at the end of the day. So with that, we definitely take a look at technology in a different way depending on our success or lack thereof, or maybe we blame a lot of stuff on technologies. And I know that a lot of times, you talk to people, it's like, I just wish the speed at which there's new products and new hardware and new software would just stop just so I could catch up with what I have now. And it's sort of funny to think about, but at the same time, the technology that we do have today, maybe you only need to be doing certain pieces with it. Maybe it's not meant to be fully explored. That's okay. But the idea is, how do you learn these tools? And for the most part, what we found is that if you really do have processes that you've been working with, and they are paper-based or some sort of manual process, when you put a piece of technology on top of it, no matter what it is, if you have a broken process, it will show it warts and all, which is why a lot of people say, oh, this technology doesn't work for me. Well, maybe it's not the technology that's not working, but maybe your process is a little off. And sometimes that's hard to sort of fathom. Starting off with the old ENIAC and trying to understand how these technologies would try to help us. Moving into what really looks like your computer closet right now. What's amazing with our industry is that the majority of firms do not have a computer engineer or a systems engineer that's gone through 6, 7, 10 years of computer school. A lot of our technology people actually came from the ranks. If you look all the way back to CAD, the good CAD guy, all of a sudden, as this firm starts to grow, all of a sudden he's being called to help out with the phone system. These are the same people that were working right next to us on the boards, and this is why sometimes we get into some issues when it comes to technologies. And of course, the workplace environment with technology, how are we designing it? And some firms have actually gone to the nth degree and started to say, at the end of the day, we have to have our people more productive, so they actually modify every piece of place and time just to try and get the efficiency factors out there. But really what we do have are these issues, and it really comes down to information and data, sometimes not being in a usable format. Case in point would be certain programs that you've used in the past to create a document. You try and open up in the same program name, but it's a different version, and sometimes there's incompatibility issues. For those of you that are into the supply chain, the consulting engineers that need to inherit CAD drawings or BIM models, that handoff from, an architect is not easy, starting from way back in the day with DXF all the way to today. How do we do this? And there have been very good solutions and others not so much. But there falls in the idea of the inconsistency, and one of the results, of course, the consequences of non-value-adding work, the inefficiency factors, the delays, and, God forbid, the rework out in the site. These are real, and these happen every day. Sitting in on, $100 million projects, and you're sitting there in a job trailer going over yet another coordination meeting between the different, major trades. BIM helps, and there's certain technologies out there that do some awesome jobs with getting to the problem ahead of time. But in reality, today, right now, going out there is really about the communication between people. And to try and create an environment that everyone has to have a similar type of technology, that's a hard thing to do, especially when you start to average out that on any given site, any given project, if you really take the average level of technology adoption and use, the highest level of adoption in the United States for the construction industry is a fax machine. So start working from there and understand that a lot of the things, the high-end stuff that you're trying to do, either passing information into you, passing it through your organization, providing the value into this, thing that we're starting to call, a digital asset. You're a steward of that information as a firm. How then you provide value as that moves through by communicating that out to the average level of a fax machine is really going to be value. So when you take a look at the capital improvement cycle, you have your big idea and a lot of information captured there, entitlement phases, design, construction, operations. For the most part, we've been document-centric forever. The idea of data flowing back and forth as digital DNA is really where this concept of a digital asset came through. Digital assets, for the most part, can be containers of information. They don't have to be 3D. for the most part, it's how do you capture enough data so that it does something. 3 years ago when the National Institute of Building Sciences came out with that report that said because of the lack of interoperability of the data between different members of our industry, that there's a 63% inefficiency factor. Could you imagine bringing any of that back into the overall value of what you provide to the project? Now, one thing that we looked at ScreenPoint when we started this entire process of changing how BIM works for us so that we do not use all the commands, and quite frankly, we don't use those programs, but actually take the essence of what it means to communicate, coordinate, collaborate, and how do you control that data flow. We start taking a look at how how a project team would actually use it and/or the end user. And the first big project that we were brought in on, of course, was by the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, working in conjunction with Brookfield Properties out of Toronto, to take a look at how to bring different programs and data together to tell a story. And we could have went by the way of all the traditional softwares, and we did. We took things like Microsoft Project and off-the-shelf at the time architectural desktop from Autodesk, and took a look at certain GIS type of programs like ArcView's, Esri's ArcView. But when you start taking a look at how they all function together, the idea of a standard that would allow, which I've seen at numerous types of conferences and conventions on the show floor, how you have IFCs and they talk to the EIOs and magically things happen. Well, that's okay, and it will happen, and I'm sure it works very well on certain projects. But I don't see it as an industry standard. We're getting there. But again, if we're doing things right now, how do you do it? Well, we took a look at data, and we saw that if you could visualize content, if you can visualize the data, the content visualized in a meaningful way, you can tell a better story. And what we did was we took a look at what was going to be proposed for all the different solutions down at ground zero, but that wasn't the immediate issue. That was going to be taken care of, which Leviskin Studio 1 and all that stuff. We needed to show what was real right now. And the reason why was because Brookfield Properties had Merrill Lynch's headquarters at the time and American Express's headquarters with people that were going to be working in there. They did not want to see a pit. So I'm going to start a video here. And Nicole, if you wouldn't mind just letting me know if it actually shows up on the screen, because sometimes they go to meeting, it just the communication of this does not work as well. And I can go back to the static image. So, so Nicole, can you verify that you're actually seeing a video? Is that right?
I just saw, yeah, we have a picture of the screen.
Okay, and you're not seeing the video, huh?
No, we are, I guess. Yeah, we are.
Okay, good. Now, what's interesting about this particular video, and again, this is from 2002, so you're looking at pretty primitive technologies, but this is where a lot of the ideas came from, which was that on the bottom screen, you actually have a Microsoft project with certain milestones, big milestones, and you tie it together to certain assets that are put into a geographic and geospatial environment. When you do that, you can actually start hooking things together. And a lot of work done at Stanford's Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, SciFi, and Walt Disney Imagineering, and a lot of these groups that were the first innovators with one of the first innovators with what's called 4D technology was actually quite remarkable, because suddenly you started not taking a look at our information as documents, but more as data. So as I go through, scrolling past in Microsoft Project, the functionality of going through a certain timeline, you can actually see the the growth of number 7 World Trade, the proposed transportation hub and all that type of stuff. Now this was before the actual award of the Leviskin's design was given, but we had to show something. Again, this was meant to show the average person, democratize our information so that they can say, wow, okay, this isn't going to be a big hole forever. I don't mind working here. And that was the real goal. That was the business decision to actually go through this process. In order to do that, though, we needed to take a different type of approach. As you can see now up on the screen here, I'm going to pop this video. I hope it actually shows. It sort of looks like a satellite photograph, but it's not. Now, this is pre-Google Earth. So we had to figure something out, which was to create digital assets in a geospatially perfect environment that actually takes into account latitude, longitude, and the z-axis. When we were able to do that, we actually went down below ground and actually started taking a look at things like the subway systems and and other key areas of steam and stormwater, wastewater, power, fresh water, all of those things, the infrastructure at least 600 yards below the actual grade that we were here at. And what was interesting about going through this exercise was that we were able to create a virtual environment. What you're seeing here, though, is not CAD. These are individual components built out of a library. The library and the database actually tell onto the GIS environment where to place those elements, and we can break it down to the component level. This is how the entertainment industry actually works. When you start seeing technologies like what they use at Weta for the Lord of the Rings, or you start seeing what they do over at Pixar even, or the other specialty shops that do work with green screen technologies like the movie 300, this is the type of way that they go about taking vast amounts of data and be able to push those things up quickly, so that we're not building complete models. What we're doing is we're completing a data model, and that when you want to visualize it, it's only what's in the field of view gets loaded in. Now, this was a huge, big breakthrough for how we started to work and starting to see how information can be better communicated, coordinated, and collaborated. But then more importantly, how do you actually mix different types of data together so that they tell a more compelling story? There are great examples out there in the world about when you actually can visualize a piece of information, you actually do have a better mousetrap. And when you democratize information, you actually get better feedback, and you actually then start to get people from outside the industry to add value into the overall business proposition. When we started doing this, around the United States, we ran into a lot of resistance, a lot of sensitive information, security issues, what have you. When we, since we're based in China, we actually got approached by government officials because they were very interested after seeing numerous types of digital cities that we were working on in San Francisco, Chicago, New York. They said, well, what else can this thing do? And when you take a look at what other industries have done, when people from outside the industry says, well, what else can you guys do? And you can visualize a piece of information, amazing things happen. The democratization of the financial world really left the pages of the Wall Street Journal and Barron's, where you had microscopic fonts with PE ratios that you sort of looked either at your mutual funds or individual stocks to actually figure out what the hell was going on in the market, to suddenly having CNBC take information, put it into a 3D graphic, and quickly demonstrate, communicate, coordinate, and collaborate information to the general masses. When you start taking that type of metaphor and put it into our industry, this is where Digital China actually came forward. They started saying, well, we need to have a better handle on exactly what's going on. We're building at the speed of light. We have 300 million people coming into 7 major cities on the East Coast because they're developed, from the poorer parts of China on the western side. This is a critical need for us to start to develop our western cities in a smart way, because if we have 300 million people over the next 5 years, by 2015, they're going to have 300 million people move into these 7 cities. Those cities are already packed, and there's a cause for major destruction and instability in society if we do this. So how do we keep the people there? How do we start building things out quickly? How do we communicate things out to the general masses where they are not experts? They don't read through environmental impact studies or Excel spreadsheet reports that are 70 pages thick. People don't have the time. So to help extract that, they took an approach of taking 100 cities of 10 million people and above. You can imagine that. They have 10 cities of 100 cities of 10 million people and above right now. And how do we now start taking a different type of approach as to how do we manage our information so that when we start to build out, we do it smart. So we hired a guy. He's our chief software architect. He created a technology called Keyhole, which was bought by Google, which is now what you use as Google Earth. He's our chief software architect. His name is Remy, and we're actually going through the process right now of creating these digital cities. A lot of it started in Hong Kong. The first one that you'll see here is the central part of Hong Kong called Central. And they had a very interesting problem about 5 years ago, and that was that they were pulling water from Victoria Harbor to pump into their tall buildings to help with the cooling systems. And at the time, there was a lot of construction going on around there, and they would have these issues of backhoes and everything else coming in and popping into the tunnels and the different pipes and everything else and disrupting that type of service, which would shut down the building because it's a cooling issue. Well, we were brought in because they could actually fix it, but it would take them time to understand where that floor plan was, where the piping diagram was, what was actually hit, can we get a replacement, and who has the specifications and information for that. And what they found was that there was some information that was paper-based, there was others that were CAD-based, there was others that were PDF-based, and in certain cases also video, because they have to have certain maintenance reports where they stick a robotic camera down into these pipes once a quarter and actually take video so that they can actually see if there's cracks in the interior of the pipe and that type of thing. They need to keep it for historical records. So they have all this multimedia, yet it's all over the place. It's on someone's C drive, it's on the K drive on the network, or it's maybe rolled up in a basement somewhere in a piece of paper. They needed to have one place where they could go that the average person could see visually how things would happen, and that's actually these screenshots that you're seeing now. I'm actually going to start up this particular screen as well. I hope that this shows up as well. This is a little application that was developed. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of a how-to, in the very beginning, we took a look at different types of expert systems to see if, like, a facility management package could do this, if a GIS program to do this, maybe CAD could do it, and we found that none of it would. So what we found is that we have, as I move this particular series of or portfolio of buildings around that actually uses this seawater system, you can see it's not graphically rich as, like, let's say, the World Trade Center, but it was a different purpose. This was meant more for direct, how do you access information in real time, and where is it? And if it's an Excel spreadsheet, I want to see it as well. So when we took a look at all these different types of softwares that needed to push up this information, we took it from a data-centric approach, and we just wrapped it with, at the time, was Macromedia's Director. So what you look at, it's just a big Flash website. It's not rocket science, and it's off the shelf. But what it did was it helped people quickly get to a piece of information that they normally would have to spend a lot of time researching and trying to look for. So on the left-hand side underneath location, I'm going to hit landmark system. I can hit any of these, Central, Exchange Square, all this stuff. But let's just pick landmark. And you can see in this section we have a whole bunch of different pipings and pump stations and that type of thing. And you can see then on number 3, this is the data sets that we wanted to see. Now, there's a lot more data to it, but all we needed was the section, the location, the segment status, last maintenance, the conditions, and accessibility, if there's any drawings. There's probably a lot more information, but that's all these people needed. So again, trying to communicate more effectively and then control that data is very, very important. So being able to click on a couple of these different pipes, well, let's see what the drawings look like for this. And boom, it just pulls up a PDF. Or if you want to see the 2D, you can pull that. If you want to go back to 3D, you can pull that up. And then ultimately we have this little video that actually shows, again, another storage area for data, multimedia, that actually shows going through a pipe, see if there's any cracks, and again, for historical reference, in case they need to replace or do any sort of preventive maintenance work. So that's where a lot of this basis happened for the Digital China Initiative. Another place where that also happened, which I'm going to pop out of this particular application now, actually I'm going to skip this, was in San Francisco. What you see now is, again, a model. It's a digital model, but it's done in a different type of environment. We took a look at a lot of the different types of expert systems that are out there, and again, when it loads in an entire city model, it becomes very unmanageable unless you have a big machine in the back end. And again, that doesn't democratize this information. So what we found was that we started taking a look outside of our industry and outside the entertainment industry and started taking a look at the gaming industry. Now, one of the requirements of China was this. It's very cool that you have all this information, with the U.S. and that you're paid to actually host it and that type of thing. But we're going to be giving you very sensitive topographical information, very sensitive geographic information, very sensitive infrastructure information that is, something that we treasure and that we really don't want outsiders to take a look at. But you're a foreign-based company. So if this goes on your hard drive and you leave the country, you could be arrested for espionage. And we needed to figure something out because I don't look good in jail. So we took a look at not so much the way that like a Google Earth works today or a Microsoft Virtual Earth or actually any of the CAD or BIM products, which is they load onto your hard drive. Well, the way the gaming industry works is that things load onto your video card. Never touches your hard drive for the most part if it's designed properly. And what that does is it creates speed of streamed real-time environments, meaning that when you're looking at a specific environment, because it's in a geospatial context, you can stick a camera anywhere you want and be able to navigate through that environment. Again, in the past, you have Google Earth and Virtual Earth that actually loads in portions of that information onto your hard drive so that you have an efficiency and also a good quality experience of moving through that virtual environment. In our case, we couldn't do that, so when we went into the OpenGL standard, which is the standard for the gaming industry, we were pleasantly surprised to learn that as long as you had a certain type of video card, which are standard today, which is 2 gig or 1 gig onto your video card, you could stream this information with, if not better quality, a more effective and efficient way of being able to load in information. It's very cool when you go through this type of environment because it allows you to navigate through, but more importantly, certain pieces of data that you call up is available to you so that you can actually do something with it. So the next screenshot you're seeing here is actually some of the functionality that was built in so that the average person could actually take a look at this and do something with it. Again, when you're in a geospatial environment, since everything's put into latitude, longitude, and z-axis, you can actually measure things. This screenshot is actually one piece where we're taking a look at one building in the financial district of San Francisco and clicking on a face and going to another face. This one actually looks like it's the Embarcadero. And you can actually then get a measurement up in the left-hand part of the screen. We call these widgets, and this is the way that this type of geospatial system works. It's not magic, but the thing is, it's in a gaming technology environment that streams across a video card. Efficiency, streamed information, and you do something with it. You can generate reports, you can print things out, but for the most part, and thankfully, in the case of China, no one actually controls it unless you want them to. And that was the big thing that actually propelled us into into our next phase. So when we in China right now, unfortunately I can't show the specifics because of, again, just the sensitive nature, but what we have been able to do is that we have one city complete called the city of Wuhan, which would be the equivalent of like St. Louis. It's in the middle of the country. It's sort of like a St. Louis meets Pittsburgh because there's 3 rivers that run right in the middle of it. We have 8,253, I think, square kilometers that have been modeled, which is a vast amount of space. And what they're using it for is that if you go into the city council chambers today, they have a huge screen, a concave screen, and they project up this particular model inside that digital environment in OpenGL that allows the average city official to actually navigate around and actually do some simulations. Consider this almost like the way they use it is like a SimCity on steroids, so that if you have a developer come in, they can actually place their model inside of this environment and start doing some very simple environmental studies, sun, shadow, that type of thing. As things progress and we start getting more artificial intelligence involved with this through plugins, they'll be able to do everything from traffic to pedestrian movements to starting to analyze and simulate what happens if there's a fire. All those things are available, and this is where the city council wanted to see it because they just built a new airport to the north of the city, and they had this corridor that they're going to have hundreds of millions of people going back and forth every year. How do they control and manage that particular artery, and what happens if that artery gets closed? So they're going through that process. They're using this type of technology to go through that. And more importantly, it's really helping the individual design institutes, which are the architectural and engineering firms in China, use design more effectively and start to simulate and see things in ways that they weren't able to before to create a better built environment. So that's the overall idea of why they needed to do this in that western city of Wuhan. Again, it's a prototype of how things are going to move forward in places like Chengdu and Chongqing and other large western cities in order to keep those 300 million people there, or at least a good portion of them. The other area that I wanted to show is digital Dubai. And this is a little different. You're seeing a screenshot right now of how this thing loads in. Again, it's a gaming environment using mapping technologies along with coordinates of latitude and longitude. And what's interesting about Dubai is that, you know, their digital city approach is actually being done because of a specific business need for the country itself. You can see that you log in just like normal. You see a username up here. It's RERA. That's actually the client. It's called the Real Estate Regulatory Authority or Agency. They run hand in hand with the land department of Dubai. And what's interesting is when you log in, projects will pop up. The reason why the projects are here, okay, is that these are existing properties that are being built upon, existing plots. And one of the things that Dubai wanted to do was to assist outside foreign investment in its emirate so that they would feel safe. You know, Dubai is no different than a lot of other places on the planet, that when a market gets hot, you get a lot of good people and sometimes not so good people. And the not so good people sometimes are coming into Dubai, making a deal for an option to purchase a piece of land, a plot within Dubai itself. And they would, you know, go out there and start promoting that they were going to be building a high-end luxury residential property. And they would only have an option to purchase the lot, and they would tell the owner of the lot, you know, once they get to like maybe 20% sold, you know, I'll be able to flip the transaction and we'll be in business. Well, what these guys were doing was they would go out to other parts of the world where there's wealth and people wanted to be part of the Dubai experience and make money, and they would actually collect a lot of down payment money and then never show up again. So they wanted to clamp down on that, make sure that that didn't happen, that this was a safe place to actually invest. And they created an escrow agency, if you want to call it that, called RERA, and we worked directly with them. The digital city approach here is a lot different, where we can actually take, you can see here there's 5 different properties that are under construction. And what happens is you go in and you actually pick from that project list, and your project information pops up in a GL environment, an open GL environment, again, a gaming technology. So we can take the BIM models and 3D models and all that other stuff, and we show it, and you can move around the property. The cool thing is this is what it's going to look like at the end. What happens is we actually put a timeline underneath, as you see here, that actually has a construction schedule that's put into RERA. And at certain milestones, we have a property observation group that goes out and says, all right, you're at about, you're supposed to be at a, you know, a 30% milestone at this point. We can see it in this environment, but I'm looking at it in another type of way, you know, in reality. And we now approve this to release the funds for that milestone at that moment in time. It doesn't do away with the architects or engineers' obligation for that, but this is more from the government side of things as a check. Now, the cool thing about this is that we're building the entire emirate from a digital ground-up way from the plot. In other words, we plot sand. But at that point, you now have the base for all the data to reside somewhere. In this case, what you're seeing is just a lot of different types of data that has been put into play, but you can actually add data into it. So you can actually right-mouse click, have a new data element, and what do you put in there? Just like the Hong Kong experience, PDFs, multimedia, reports, photographs, whatever is going to help with the historical context of that particular project is what gets put in there. You can actually start turning on the entire complex, the entire portfolio itself, to start seeing what's on time, what's not, just by color graphics. In this case, the roof is blue because it's well underway. You can see everything else is yellow because there's a scheduling issue, and they're going to be a little bit late. So, or you can just turn on the regular context of texture just to see what it's going to look like at the end of the day. So by creating a digital city from the ground up, we found that this business model is very interesting. It's something that other people in government positions in other countries are actually taking a look at to say, hey, this is something that actually helps us. And, oh, by the way, the resultant effect is we're going to have an entire digital city at the end of the day that is complete, so that we can actually do what China's doing, which is using it for strategic planning and other very important issues such as infrastructure and water and power and all that stuff that everyone is clamoring for right now for sustainability. This is the type of report that's available right now. You can go up to the Red website and see it, but these are the types of reports that come out of what we do. It's an automated process. We have our photographs with the inspection report is, and of course what the progress indicator is, probably the most important measurement at that point. Our CEO, Michael Jansen, was involved with an interesting presentation to the city of Cleveland for the school district. And here's another way of looking at information that, again, takes everything that's been done in China and Dubai and Hong Kong and other places and says, all right, we have a portfolio of buildings here in Cleveland that have a lot of different needs, everything from conditions assessment to facility management, operations, maintenance, to ecological, trying to do space utilization, energy performance, security. There's a lot of expert systems that already do that. But if you're a manager sitting up at top, should you be going through, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different expert systems and have to know how to use all of those? Or can we be doing something a little bit differently? And that's where, again, we took the same metaphor of signing in and doing it as a hosted service, and it loads up this particular element. This one's for conditions assessment. You have a zonal map of the different school districts within the entire district itself. You can see here that, red, green, blue. Green, your schools are fine there. Yellow, you got something coming up that you should take a look at. But red, we have an issue. And in this case, this is James Ford Rhodes High School. This is a roof replacement issue. And in this case, you can actually then say, all right, what's going on? And because this is a overall wrapper that actually goes in and extracts out the data from an expert system, you can actually open up a BIM model. In this case, this. I'm not sure if the video is showing or not. It could be black. But suffice to say that this particular model allows people to say, okay, yes, this is the particular problem. Let's go up to the roof. And you can actually start going up to the roof problems and those issues and actually drill down into that expert system. In this case, this is Revit. And we're actually using Autodesk Design Review that's actually built into the system. So again, off-the-shelf software, just trying to tell a better story. And of course, there's some resultant effects, how to fix it, and that actually gets put back into the database itself. Floor plans, structural plans, whatever you want inside of that is what's going to be served up. In this case, we also have metric performance data based on dashboard metaphors, which are very popular. And again, built into the system so that you don't have to go into 5 different systems just to get a simple report out. This way of aggregating data is something that we're finding to be a more and more needed thing, not just in business, but also for communicating out to the general public, especially when we start seeing certain projects that are associated with things like stimulus funding and everything else that has to have some sort of public hands or knowledge or eyeballs on it. We're finding that the way to visualize data is becoming more and more important. Who better than the people on this call to actually lead that charge? Again, if you want more detailed analysis of that particular roof, you go into the expert system. And again, the entire gaming world allows you then to pull up that type of system. And if you're the expert in that and want to fool around with it and do what you have to do as a professional, well, that's available to you as well. Because it's a gaming metaphor, and the actual back-end technology is gaming, it can be ported onto any device. In this case, it's on an iPhone. Of course, it needs to be modified for font size and all those things, but any information that can be pushed will be pushed as long as you have certain types of guidelines, such as certain video minimum standards. And as long as you have that, the portability of this information is readily available. In this case, also, we have operations maintenance. For this one, this was an assessment report for taking care of the different fire extinguishers. Again, a person goes around maybe once a week, sees the levels. If they're a little off, something pops up red. It immediately then goes into a work order environment, which is an expert system, which is outside of this system, but this is the way that it's communicated from the top down. And of course, in this case, it's a 360 facility. You can actually get your safety audits and actually work order reports and move forward with that. The last thing I want to show is, we start to wrap up here, is how we can take all this stuff, not just from an individual asset, as you saw with the schools, or from an overall environment, such as, San Francisco or Hong Kong, or an entire emirate like Dubai, or an entire country like China. What's cool is when you take that funnel approach, very big, all the way down to the minute. We were approached by one of the largest retailers in the world to actually take a look at their big box and use that as a metaphor of a city to help them. And in this case, we've changed the colors and the brand to protect the innocent. But I think you can probably figure out what retailer this is. But we were asked to take the gaming environment and create a virtual environment for them to help on the back end of things in retail. There's been a lot of talk about doing front-end retail in 3D for the average person, and I think it's a little too soon. I'm sure there's people going to experiment with it, and God bless them. I'd love to learn from them so I can make the money. But for the most part, we looked at these gaming environments for visualization and virtualization of information for back-end use. In this case, for this big box retailer, it was to take the entire environment and allow all 3,000 stores to have a standard way of making sure that things like signage or the placement of individual products was perfect, because they get paid a lot of money by different vendors such as Procter & Gamble and Kellogg's and everyone else to place certain products at certain places. Why? Well, it's just like in a city where you have certain roads that are trafficked heavier, or maybe there's a more valuable commodity like a park or some sort of edifice that is famous, that you have higher rents at certain places because of that. Same thing inside of a store. There are certain shelves that have a higher value if you place the product on there, and that's where these large-scale retailers make a lot of money, is on the placement, but they have to measure it and prove it. So by being able to push this information out over a video card, being able to print it out on demand at each individual store, every store manager can not only be measured through CCTV because they can see if they're doing it, but also then see how to do it because there's business rules built into each piece of merchandise. In other words, if this piece of popcorn over here was trying to be put into the women's section, because the business rule is written in to that particular product, and the product knows inside the geospatial environment that it's not supposed to be there, it won't let you do it. So you can actually do a lot of interesting things when it comes to store design. We have components of parts. As you see here, there's what they call a gondola. Gondola is this the thing that creates the shelving systems, and here's the individual shelves, and you can place them. The shelf also has certain business rules associated with it, such as there's only a certain amount of merchandise you can fit on it. You can't stack it and do all sorts of funky things. You can also then go down into the individual product itself, and this is where it starts to integrate into the back end of this big box retailer's inventory systems. So when they're actively going through an RFDI, or radio frequency identification program, which also hooks into each individual item. What's cool about that is that these real-time environments for all 3,000 stores have unique instances, so that your store is your store. If it's a little modified because of the geography or the way that that particular big box was created, you are then seeing that in real time with all of your merchandise specifically placed on every piece of shelf. Why that's important is because of shrinkage control and eventually to start analyzing how people shop. They've not gone to that level, but that's the overall idea. But the ability to, again, to take data from back-end systems that are available and show things like price codes and associate with a piece of merchandise is huge for these folks, because now they can actually start fooling around with prototyping, rapid prototyping, where they weren't able to before. The expert systems that are already in place for the placement of products and for the layouts are already in place. What this does is that this enhances it in a way that allows them to save a hell of a lot of money, specifically on the idea of sending people out to make sure and ensure that the standards are in place by these store managers. The estimates right now is that when this was fully implemented this past spring and they did their prototype and testing, that the eventual overall annual savings just on ensuring that the information that was supposed to be on those, the information inside the system, being able to measure what was in reality, was a savings of $42 million to the bottom line. So this goes a lot beyond just trying to integrate information and trying to do things that are just cool. It's trying to find what is the best business situation to have visual information work for our clients. And this is how it's done. What we use as our base is Uniformat, and we use this as the base for every single project we're on. As long as you have this base of data, you can do a lot of things with it. Again, a lot of people don't like the format sometimes, or it's too strict. But if you actually have a discipline about this, it becomes a very, very valuable way of sharing information. We use off-the-shelf software. We use 3D Max mostly that gets imported into the GLSI, our OpenGL standard environment that has our features and functions built in. We use everything from Revit and Bentley and Graphisoft to Oracle systems in the back end, and of course Adobe products that used to be called Macromedia. So just to wrap up, we do have new values because of these types of innovations as industry leaders. Your responsibility right now is to understand that, and also understand that the process is much more important than the expert system. And I'm really, really tired of having expert systems having me change my process. It's good to see that the technologies are starting to catch up that are allowing you to actually keep your processes and to find out what works for you and then have that software adapt to it. I think that's a huge breakthrough. It's nice to see that with a lot of different groups. I hope that everyone does pop on board. Our new revenues is to treat data as digital DNA. Every time you're hitting the enter key inside of your firm, you should be understanding that that should be almost like ringing a cash register. And really what it comes down to is the specs behind that. The data is more important than actually the actual drawing itself. That we are taking a look at technology and communications as an integrated fourth utility. In a big way, we're seeing that across the board, and that the digital asset and physical asset have ways of providing new revenue streams that we didn't even think of that are being presented to us every day. And, overall, new designs, the idea of all this information, this data is one thing, but having it interact directly with that built environment is a very exciting new phase of interactive environments, that it really comes down to not just the coolness factor, but providing better life safety and security options, and of course having a real measurement on sustainability, not what could be, but what is. Being able to monitor, being able to change things on the fly, and being able to do something with the data is definitely the next great phase that we're heading into. It's no longer that you actually get an accreditation and certification because they think you can do something. You can be measured on how you're doing. So is technology the dark side? For some of us, yeah. But for the most part, we are immigrants in this whole new reality. And I don't know, I have a niece and nephew that are 7 and 4 years old, and they're not afraid about pressing the buttons. They're the natives, and we should really be taking a look at how they use technology to help us learn. And finally, I have to ask you all, what is your future? Because this is an exciting time. And I think with that, I'd like to say in Chinese, 谢谢, which means thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I do have a question. I actually have 2 questions, if you have a moment. And the gentleman wants to know, his question came in a little earlier about how do you design the houses? Do you use specific CAD software, or do you have your own format, which I think you did answer here in the last slide. But he also asked about whether you use industry foundation classes, IFCs, as part of the data models.
Yeah, no, we don't. And one reason why we don't is that we found that there are other industries that are sharing data more effectively with industry standards that the IFCs have not looked at, but that's okay because the way our internal processes work internally between the different professions and roles, IFCs are needed. The problem is they have not been developed fast enough, and we need them now. So what we need to do is get out of our industry and understand that there's a data flow that happens between different industry groups, be it a financial services firm that needs a building built. Internally, we can use IFCs, but when we're talking about handing information off to cities and governments, we need to take a look at what was more of the standard outside, and those are more mature, quite frankly. That doesn't mean that you stop IFC. It doesn't, and you need to position and reposition ourselves that when they mature and they make business sense to us, we will use them. But for the most part, we sort of are looking at BIM and IFCs and all these different processes that are being proposed and saying when they make a lot of sense in theory. When I see it in reality, I'd love to implement it.
Okay, and last question. It looks like a lot has happened since we last heard from you several years ago in Houston. Do you have any teasers for us as to where this is going in the future, what this presentation might look like 3 to 5 years from now?
Wow, that's a question. Yeah, actually, there's a technology by IO2 Technologies that I think is fundamentally going to change a lot of how we view presentation information, actually. We're experimenting with it. It's holographic displays, but not the holographics like you're used to that are pretty nasty. We're talking stuff that is virtually indistinguishable from reality. And it uses ions of oxygen to actually produce the actual image. When we start going into that type of world, 3 to 5 years from now, we're not just going to be talking about how to produce buildings, but how the technology is actually part of the palette of the experience of the building. And that's where I'm excited, is the integration of technology into the walls, floors, and ceilings of every built environment, and how that whole new canvas becomes a new opportunity for us to provide a better experience.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We are out of time. Would you give your contact information, Paul, in case people want to follow up with you directly?
Sure. They can contact me at actually PDOHERTY at pipeline.com. And the reason why I say pipeline is because when you travel around the world, there's, you get certain emails that work everywhere and others that don't, and in this case, this one works. So. Pipeline is P-I-P-E-L-I-N-E.
Great. And for those of you that indicated during your registration that we could share your contact information with Paul, we will be doing that as well, so I'm expecting to hear from him some more. As I said, we have recorded the presentation. We will be posting it on the FIATech website in the media library later this week. With that, I want to thank you, Paul, very much for this presentation, and thanks everyone for joining us. And please check the schedule and plan on joining us next Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Have a great day.